moving straight on to qualifying, we had quite a few interesting results. It was obviously quite a difficult track. We know that Portimao, the words roller coaster and undulating were used an awful lot because it is. It is a lot of different shots of cars emerging over hills and the like. Quite a challenge for the drivers. It was very windy, which made it very difficult as well. Certain cars were reacting slightly differently to those conditions. But we had a few upsets as a result. Starting with, I think it's worth saying, Valtteri Bottas, who finally gets pole. It's been an uncharacteristically bad start to the season for Bottas, who tends to come flying out of the starting blocks, but he has finally got his pole position here. 3 different pole sitters in 3 different races, of course, which adds to a bit of excitement. And speaking of Bottas, seeing as now we've got him, almost contending with another driver here, George Russell, who himself had his best ever qualifying for Williams and missed out on Q3 by a tiny amount. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it was a very small amount.
I believe it was less than a tenth.
Yeah, it kicked off what looked to be a relatively positive, what might be a positive weekend for Williams at the time. And Ocon also had a great result, starting P6. Alpine started to look a little bit more like a contender this weekend going into the race. His best qualifying result since Belgium in 2020. And another good and perhaps surprising result was Sebastian Vettel finally getting into Q3. But as he himself said, still a lot of work to do. What stuck out in qualifying for you? I've got a couple more here, but what stuck out for you there?
You've mentioned all the highlights, which I'm just like to reiterate. I mean, George Russell in P11, what a way to bounce back from your difficult week last time out in Imola. Very controversial with the accident and obviously what happened post-race, and he's bounced back. He's released a statement. He's come back stronger. He says his relationship with Williams, Bottas, and Mercedes is completely fine. They've had a debrief, and what a way to reignite that hope or your position to show people that look what I can do in one of the slowest cars in the grid. I can put it into Q2, narrowly missing Q3. I mean, that would have been incredible if he got it into Q3. I would have been jumping for joy. But the thing which really stuck out for me was Daniel Ricciardo. Apart from all the good stuff, we'll go on to the bad stuff now. Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren, I really thought this weekend, and in some aspects it was a good weekend for Daniel because his recovery drive was brilliant. He did a really good job. But the fact that he had to do a recovery drive was a shame because he got knocked out in Q1, which is the first time a McLaren's been knocked out in Q1 since 2019 Brazil, which is when Carlos Sainz got knocked out in Q1. Carlos went on to get a podium. Daniel did not. I love it when commentators do that. I'm just going to go off a little bit side tangent. They're like, oh, the last time a McLaren driver got knocked out in Q1, they got on the podium. So it must be that Daniel Ricciardo is going to get a podium today. I'm like, no, that's not how statistics work. That's not how... Okay, statistics do work in people's favour if there's a lot of data. Like, Lewis Hamilton might win this race because he's a 7-time world champion. But saying that Daniel Ricciardo might get a podium, I thought, let's just drop the statistics and actually get on with the coverage. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, an exit in Q1 was really not what he wanted, especially as he's trying to prove to everyone that he's getting used to the car. 3rd race of the season. I thought this might be where we start seeing Daniel come alive a little bit. But equally, it is a track where we've only raced at once in the last couple of years. So maybe that should happen more towards Spain, a very familiar track next week. A lot of testing's been done in Spain before, so hopefully we'll see a little bit of improvement. But that was the shocker for me that Ricciardo was so far down the pecking order.
Yeah, it was a really poor result, and he was understandably very gutted. I believe he was keeping with Norris's pace on the mediums. It was on the softs that he really suffered. Got stuck in traffic at one point, which probably didn't help, but overall was just simply not fast enough. He said that Zach Brown had told him to chill out, dude, which sounds like a very Zach Brown thing to say.
Yeah.
Because it was only race 2, and obviously now it's race 3. I also expected to see Daniel pick things up a little bit here. And obviously, like you say, good recovery drive, but shouldn't really be seeing a McLaren starting from P16. It's not 2017. We don't want to see a McLaren starting in P16. So yeah, Spain, hopefully maybe a slightly more, in the best kind of way, predictable result for Daniel Ricciardo, I hope. What else in anything else in qualifying stick out for you?
I think that's about it for me, to be honest. I mean, I was very happy with Lando. Being that we're on the topic of McLaren, I was happy that Lando was in the top 10. I kind of expected a little bit better, but Charles did a really good, not Charles, Carlos did a really good job in putting that Ferrari in P5. Definitely, we've seen this across the field actually, that a lot of cars have qualifying pace, are really set up for qualifying, and then as soon as it gets to race day, they're impacted by the wind, their variant tire temperatures, their variant track temperatures, and they just fall down the grid. You can see that with a handful of cars throughout the weekend. Carlos being one of them, they did a fantastic job in Saturday and just slipped down the grid a little bit on the Sunday. But it's good to see Lando up there as well. And obviously got
And
a
no
really good
one was
finish.
that that Sunday deficit more apparent than for George Russell, who you already mentioned missed a Saturday. When
Yeah.
that when that happened, especially with Latifi struggling down in 18th, I think he started.
Yep.
I was thinking, well, maybe that Williams isn't really that bad. Maybe it's actually an all right car, and if you can just put it together in the right way, it actually has a lot of potential because he was still a reasonable distance up the field. This field is obviously much closer this year, but it
Yeah.
gives you a sense that the car does have potential. But then when it came to the race, it just didn't happen. And we can discuss this more in a bit, but yeah, that was a very common story across the field from Saturday to Sunday. Is like you say, people could tie it together for one lap, but then as soon as they had race pace and tires and wind and all the rest of it to deal with, it shook up the grid even more.